Mary Queen of Scots was buried not once but twice. Her execution did not go well, and to begin with, Elizabeth I took a long time to sign her death warrant, meaning there was an astonishing delay. But the whole grisly procedure was terrible. The executioner took multiple swings of his axe to take her head, and then he dropped the former Scottish Queen's head on the ground when he raised it up to show the crowd. Then there was a delay in her burial, leading to her embalmed corpse being left in a side room inside the same castle where she was executed. But eventually she was buried, first inside of Peterborough Cathedral. However, when her son succeeded Elizabeth I as the King of England, he ordered Mary Queen of Scots to be exhumed from her first grave, and she was dug up, and her coffin was then paraded to London and buried inside of Westminster Abbey. Today, Mary Queen of Scots is buried under a huge tomb and inside of a burial vault, along with many other members of the Stuart family. But what was found inside of her first grave when her body was dug up? To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Mary's execution was ordered by Elizabeth I after Mary was implicated in the Babington plot, a conspiracy to assassinate Elizabeth and place Mary on the English throne. Despite Elizabeth's initial reluctance, partly out of fear of executing an anointed queen, Mary's signed involvement in the plot, as revealed by the code-breaking genius Sir Francis Walsingham, left Elizabeth with very little political choice. The English Parliament pressed for Mary's death, viewing her as a perpetual threat to the Protestant reign. And on the evening before her execution, Mary, now 44 years old, was informed of her fate. She received the news calmly, spending her final hours in prayer and writing letters. Among her last writings was a moving letter to Henry III of France, in which she declared herself a martyr for the Catholic faith. That night she spent time with her ladies-in-waiting, preparing for the morning's grim ritual. Mary rose early on the morning of her execution. She dressed with care, choosing a gown of black satin, symbolising death and mourning, with a crimson underskirt and sleeves beneath, a powerful Catholic symbol of martyrdom and the blood of Christ. She adorned herself with a crucifix, rosary beads, and a veil of white, intending her appearance to echo the image of a devout Catholic martyr as she went to her death. At around 8 a.m, Mary was led from her chambers to the Great Hall of Fotheringhay Castle. The hall had been transformed into a makeshift execution chamber, with a raised wooden scaffold draped in black cloth, a low block, and a cushion for her to kneel upon. The audience included noblemen, officials, and witnesses sent by Elizabeth to ensure that the execution was carried out lawfully. Mary carried a small crucifix and a prayer book as she mounted the scaffold. Two executioners, clad in black and masked to preserve anonymity, awaited her. Sir Amias Paulet, her strict jailer, and the Earl of Shrewsbury were present to oversee the proceedings. Mary spoke with composure, addressing the assembled witnesses. She declared her innocence regarding the Babington plot, reiterating that she had never sought Elizabeth's death. Instead, she claimed she died as a Catholic martyr and a rightful queen unjustly condemned. Her final words before kneeling were reported as, "In manus tuas doman commendo spiritum meum." "Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." A line from the Psalms and one of Christ's final utterances on the cross. The execution itself was both shocking and brutal. Mary knelt on the cushion, laid her head on the low block, and stretched out her arms in prayer. The first blow from the executioner's axe struck the back of her head rather than her neck, failing to sever it. A murmur of horror rippled through the hall. The second blow struck closer to the mark, but it still did not complete the task. It was only on the third stroke that her head was fully severed from her body. As the executioner held her head aloft crying, "God save the Queen," a macabre detail emerged. Mary's auburn locks, once framed for her beauty, were revealed to be a wig. Her head fell from his hands, leaving the executioner holding only her hair whilst her severed head rolled onto the scaffold. Her ladies screamed in grief, and even the hardened officials were visibly shaken by the grisly scene. Adding to the horror, Mary's small pet dog, a Skye Terrier, was found hiding beneath the skirts. The animal refused to leave her body, eventually having to be forcibly removed, its fur matted with her blood. The execution of Mary Queen of Scots was followed by a careful and ritualistic handling of her remains. Her body was immediately disrobed and checked for relics of items or Catholic devotion, which the Protestant authorities feared could become objects of veneration. Her clothing was burnt to prevent sympathisers from collecting pieces of holy relics, and her body was then embalmed and placed into a lead coffin. Now, there was a lot of chaos at the time as to where to bury Mary Queen of Scots. Technically, she was a traitor, and traitors throughout the Tudor period had their heads placed on spikes above London Bridge, and their remains usually thrown inside of a common grave. But this was a Queen of Scotland. Mary's body was brought from Fotheringhay on the 30th of July 1587, over 5 months after the execution. This would not have done her much good, and the decomposition process, despite her body being wrapped in cerecloth, most probably began. There was a large procession to Peterborough Cathedral, where the funeral of Mary took place. Now, the grave of Mary was dug inside of the cathedral, close to the high altar, and opposite the burial vault of Catherine of Aragon, the first wife of King Henry VIII. The man who dug the grave was the sexton of the cathedral, Old Scarlet, a man who was in his 90s when he received the call to dig the grave for a queen. The coffin was brought over to the south choir altar, and a deep pit had been dug. This wasn't necessarily a vault either, which would have given better protection to the corpse. It was said, when Mary's coffin was lowered into the vault, that those who remained drew together round the vault, where the Dean of Peterborough read the funeral service. As the last words of this died away under the vaulted roof, each of the officers raised his staff above his head and broke it in two, throwing the ends into the vault upon the coffin, and all was done. She was laid to rest a period of around 25 years, as when Mary's son James I came onto the English throne, after the death of Queen Elizabeth I, he ordered a huge tomb to be made for his mother inside of Westminster Abbey. But of course there was no point building a tomb if they weren't going to place the body of Mary Queen of Scots under it. Work was done almost as soon as James came onto the throne, and a huge tomb with a lifelike effigy of Mary was eventually constructed. The work took around 7 years to be finished, and this included building a large vault for Mary under Westminster Abbey's floor. In 1612, the time to exhume her coffin had come, and the first grave of Mary Queen of Scots was broken into. The grave diggers removed the floor and tombstone, and they dug deep and came across her coffin. This was then lifted from the grave and was placed directly onto the back of a carriage, which began the procession to London and Westminster Abbey. Mary was then laid to rest finally under a tomb befitting her status, and she still remains there today. The first grave of Mary Queen of Scots is actually still visible today. Only a few flooring slabs remain, as does a sign which outlines the place of burial and interment. It's not known exactly what sort of condition Mary Queen of Scots' remains would have been in, but the exhumation of her corpse may have caused further decay within the coffin. Later, her coffin was described as being in a bad way within Westminster Abbey itself, due to the fact so many other burials had been crammed into her vault. Thank you for watching, and to support, please remember to subscribe, and again, thank you so much for watching.